Hello and welcome to episode 52 of the LiveFitNow podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Vicky Brown and I am your host. Today's episode is a conversation, and as always, I would love to hear from you once you've given this episode a listen. I loved having this conversation and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on it. So without further ado, here is the conversation. My guest today is a master coach, embodiment expert, yoga teacher, breathwork facilitator, and wild woman who is dedicated to guiding the people she works with towards removing what stands in the way of themselves and their dreams. Her name is Leah McQuade. Welcome to the LiveFitNow podcast. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm great.
Good. Glad to hear it. So I pretty much always start with all of my guests on my podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background? Like, why do you specialize in this area? What is it that you do?
Yeah, so I started as an occupational therapist working in the healthcare profession, and I found myself slowly being burnt out. I found myself not really being fulfilled by the work that I was doing any longer. And I wanted to figure out what my calling and my purpose was in life. And so I went on this big journey with my husband. He and I traveled the world for 18 months. And in that time, I was really devoted to figuring out, who am I? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? Because what I was doing just didn't feel in my heart really fulfilling any longer. And so I started in that journey doing yoga. I started a meditation practice. I learned meditation back when I was in my 20s. I found a really amazing holistic therapist who taught me meditation. And so I had learned meditation and was practicing meditation. And then I slowly, as I got into this profession, I lost that. So I really lost my center and lost my way. And during these travels and during this adventure with my husband, I was trying to find my way again and trying to find my wholeness. And along the way, travel was one of the things that opened up a whole new level of understanding of who I am at a deeper level. Travel will do that to you. But also I found practices like yoga. I started teaching yoga and doing meditation regularly. It was one of those things that I really needed to have in my life. And then from there, I've just learned different embodiment strategies and embodiment tools and found coaching as a gift of mine. You know, there was this calling that I had to do something different. I was really feeling that call. You know, there was that tap on the shoulder and I was feeling it. You know, I was meant to do something different in this world and found coaching. So that, and also breathwork facilitation and shamanic healing work. Those are the things that I love. And that's a little bit about my story. And I just love the work that I do, helping women really become the best versions of themselves.
Do you remember any specific moments when you were traveling? Are there places the way you were when you were traveling where you just had those little moments of clarity?
You know, there were so many moments. And for me, what was really interesting was feeling at home in countries and places I have never been before. There was a few places. India was one of them. I really felt a strong connection to India, and especially the women in India. That was really a profound experience. And India is so paradoxical, you know, and it was a challenge for me to be there because the Western way of living is very different than how they live in India. And I thought I was going to go to India and there'd be people doing yoga all over the place. And honestly, I was really naive about what yoga really was. I just started my yoga journey, really. I mean, the real in-depth yoga, not the westernized yoga. I mean, all yoga is great. I love all yoga. But it is very different in India. Yoga is really a lifestyle. And I learned that by going to India. You know, it's not going into a yoga studio and doing yoga like I thought. I thought there'd just be yoga studios everywhere and people in parks doing yoga. But yoga is really a lifestyle. And so that was a big turning point for me in really diving in deeper into what really is yoga, you know, and getting kind of out of the typical understanding of what we know yoga to be in the Western world.
I'm guessing that experience completely changed your perspective and your own practice of yoga as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I started to dive a little bit deeper into the different spiritual aspects of yoga and bhakti yoga. I explored bhakti yoga, and yeah, and making yoga more of a lifestyle. I have to say, rather than just a 60-minute practice in a studio. I mean, the physical practice of yoga is amazing and really beneficial, and it's just one part of yoga. And so yeah, I would say India was really life-changing for me, very life-changing. And you know, the kind of just answering the question, going back to the other experiences with travel that really helped me, you know, find clarity. I think just in the way that we traveled, we did workaways. So we gave our time in exchange for room and board, and just allowing ourselves to see how other people in other parts of the world live, rather than doing the touristy things. Trust me, we did the touristy things too, but we also, you know, would find ourselves in these really remote places where there were no tourists and there were no big touristy things to do. We were just living with the people who lived in these different parts of the world, and we were part of their family. We were helping them with their businesses, or you know, teaching yoga. I got to teach yoga around the world, and that to me was really, it allowed me to just remove myself from my own ego, if that makes sense. It kind of allowed me to just look beyond what I was seeing in the Western world. It helped me just to realize that there's different ways of living and being, and that I don't have to put myself into these little boxes, and all these ways that we should live, right? Like, I think we get into these little habits and formations and like patterns and of ways that we should be in the world. And when you open that door and allow for the opportunity to see different ways of being, it really expands and changes how you show up in the world. Absolutely. Yeah, it was a really amazing experience.
Yeah, because so much of what we, you know, our environment makes such a big difference to how we see the world. And of course, we all have the idea of these stereotypes of different cultures around the world and what we think their lives are like. But it sounds like you really had that opportunity to truly immerse and truly, even if just for a brief moment, understand how that culture truly lived, rather than the idea that we like to think that we know.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and there was this connectability, this you know, living all as one sort of experience that, you know, the spiritual world wants to talk about. And I really got to feel that, you know, I really got to feel that we are all one, and we are all connected, and we all do the same things in life. Essentially, we all want the same things. And you know, the Buddhists talk about how we all suffer, and that's true too. That's a connection that I made with people all around the world, is that, you know, we all really want the same thing, despite how we live our lives. You know, we all want the same things. And so there was this ability to really feel this deeper connection of being one, and how we're all one universe, and we're all one, you know, we're all united as one. And so I really got to feel that on a deeper level. And I think travel can offer that to us, the travel in the way that we traveled. I think, you know, I think sometimes we can be touristy and be around other tourists and just go to see the sights, but no, the way that, so I'm really grateful. I followed my intuition when it came to the traveling piece. Really just it was, yeah, just followed that intuition. Where should we go next, and what should we do next? And
I can see how the yoga obviously came into really making sense with all of that. And I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about yoga being more of a lifestyle. And I know this is going to, of course, be an individual thing and how individuals will choose to take it into their life. But what does a yoga lifestyle look like to you?
I love that. So for me, I mean, meditation, I think starting your day out with intention is really important rather than waking up and going straight into your day. I think meditation, that was the purpose of the asana anyway, the physical practice that we know of. The purpose was for 12-year-old boys to be able to sit in meditation longer. That's really why the asana part of yoga came about. And so I think that part's really important. And then, there's really looking at holistically. Yoga is really, I think, a holistic practice. It's a holistic practice, mind, body, and spirit. So what are you putting in your body, right? It's looking at keeping your vessel clean and clear, and so it's also how you're treating people, right, throughout your day, which goes back to taking care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, your mind, body, and spirit, right, if you're not taking care of yourself, then you might be irritable and you might snip at somebody and not mean to. And so it's taking care of yourself so then you can be a steward of the work out in the world, and be an open vessel for love, for God's love, be an open vessel for God's love, so there, yeah, that's what's living a yoga lifestyle is for me, is really connecting the mind, the body, and the spirit, and then going out in the world with that sense of wholeness and being a steward of God's love, a weapon for God's love. Yeah.
I can really feel the passion that comes from you. And is this what you talk about a lot with your clients? So how you're saying coaching has become sort of what it is that you do. So how do you work with people? How do you help them? What is it that you do?
Yes. Well, this is so individual. This is really individual, but this is one of the things absolutely at the heart of what I teach in my coaching practice, is helping women come back to a sense of wholeness within. And so I really truly believe that we are all whole. We are all perfect beings within. And we just come into this world as we evolve, as we grow into adults, we pick up things that kind of cloud our ability to see our wholeness. And nobody's broken, nothing needs to be fixed. It's really just about removing what's in the way of you feeling your wholeness. And so that could be a lot of things, right? That can be traumas from our past that certainly can block us from feeling whole. It can be a sense of shame or guilt. It can be just stuffing emotions, right? Not learning how to move emotions, because we don't learn that as children most of the time, right? We don't learn how, right? We don't learn
not
how
a Western thing.
It is not. Yeah, we don't learn, right, how to express our emotions in a healthy way. So most of us just stuff our emotions, and that can cause so much illness, either mentally, physically, emotionally. All of that can just drain us, and it just stacks up and piles up and prevents us from really seeing our wholeness. So a lot of it is just removing what's in the way of people not feeling vibrant, not feeling their life force, not feeling their best. And so it's at the heart of my yoga. It's at the heart of my coaching practice, for sure.
Do you think a lot of people feel lost, whether they maybe never did find themselves or they've lost themselves along the way? Do you think that's often the case?
Yes, I think even more so since 2020. I think we distract ourselves a lot from doing the work to feel what it is we really need, and to feel the loss, right? Or to feel the disconnection, or to feel the painful emotions, or, and we've discovered these amazing ways in our modern world to distract ourselves. And there's so many scrolling through social media, eating, obviously, the drugs and the alcohol, the binge watching Netflix. And those things don't necessarily have to be bad, but when you're doing them in excess to avoid what really needs to be looked at and moved through, and to raise the consciousness of this planet, then it becomes something. It becomes something bigger. And I think this 2020 and the pandemic has asked us all to go inward, right? We can't distract in the same ways that we used to. We just can't. And as we are sitting with ourselves, we don't like what we see. And it's hard. But this is how we're going to raise the frequency of the planet. And this is how we're going to change the world, is by each one of us dropping in and doing the work. And here's the thing, you can't do the work entirely on your own. I was just recently talking to a client of mine through email, and she says, I'm reading all the books, Leah. I took your free masterclass on burnout, and I'm doing all the things, and it's really helping. And I'm not ready yet. And that's okay. Many of us aren't ready to take that next step. And there will be a time where you get to a point in your evolution, in your consciousness, that you need a teacher. You need somebody to carry the load for you. Because that's the thing. We aren't designed as human beings to carry everything we've been carrying on our own so far. Like we both live in these very individualistic societies, right? Mm-hmm. And we're, I think, recognizing in this, we're in this together, and that we really are. And there comes a point where in our self-evolution or self-development, whatever you want to call it, where we need to ask for help. And when that time comes, there's a lot of coaches out there, and I'm one, and would love to support any of your listeners who are ready to really take that next step. Because you can't carry what we've been carrying. You can't carry it. I mean, it's so much to carry for a lot of us, depending on your history, how you grew up, what traumas you're carrying. And I'm a big believer that if you're in this human body, if you're in this meat suit, right, you have traumas. You have traumas, whether they're big T traumas, like we all know about, like the physical abuse, being in a horrific accident. And then there's the small T traumas. And those are the ones that can be pushed aside often, right? There comes a point where the big T traumas are like, okay, they're really affecting how you're showing up in life. And there's lots of practitioners out there that are really trauma informed to help you move through that. And then there's the small T traumas, right? Maybe you were bullied as a kid, or maybe, there's a parenting relationship that wasn't supportive, right? So it doesn't seem like this big T trauma, but small T traumas really add up as well.
They accumulate, don't they? I think that's actually one of the things that often is overlooked. It doesn't always have to be massive. Sometimes lots and lots of little ones are actually even more detrimental if you've ignored them all as well, because that's actually a lot of things that you need to try and unravel and let go of.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of that happens in the body, all of that, it happens within the nervous system. And there's a lot of research now around trauma and how it gets stored within the nervous system. And this is why so many of us get triggered throughout the day, because just that sight of something can trigger your body to experience as if you were back in the trauma that you had. And cognitively, you may be like, but this has nothing to do with what I was, it has nothing to do with anything. And it's not until you really unravel the nervous system, because the, body remembers what the mind forgets. And this is why embodiment work is really important, and going inward, beginning to self-regulate and understand your triggers, and have practices that help you be able to relax the nervous system and calm the nervous system.
Yeah, the last few minutes you've been talking, like, then the word that just kept popping into my head was connection. And I think connection to yourself, to ourselves, that's one thing that I think and is most easy to work on. And the other thing that I think has perhaps been the real trigger for a lot of people struggling the last couple of years is that external connection. And because I think internal and external connection is so important for us as humans, And again, it's one of those things, particularly in the Western society, it's completely overlooked. It might just be a part of life, but we haven't necessarily given it the importance that it absolutely deserves, because being removed from one another has clearly had a huge impact. And not having, as you say, that support network, whether that be a group or one individual, that can just give you that boost to allow you to deal with things rather than just bring it all in upon yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, being connected and having a tribe, if you think about it, that's survival for us. That's survival. So a lot of us were shaken up by not having those deep connections, not having our tribe, right? It goes straight back to our survival, because we need our tribe. We need our tribe for hunting food, and for gathering, and for protection. And although those primal needs we don't see anymore in the modern world, but when we didn't have it, all of a sudden, all of our primal safety, need for protection got rocked. You know, we were rocked to our core because we didn't have that sense of safety that we're used to. Yeah, absolutely. So important. Yeah.
And if you start working with people, and I know, again, it always comes down to being individual, and that's what it's all about, figuring out for yourself. But are there some places that you start? You know, if people they're looking to help themselves, what's the first thing you recommend that they do?
Yeah, like you said, it is very individual. You know, I have a client right now who we're starting on the emotional level, and we're starting there because what's coming up for her is the emotions around this trauma that she experienced when she was younger. And so we're starting there, and I'm holding this space and this container for her to cry. And I'm not telling her don't cry. I'm just holding that container and allowing the tears to come up and out, because emotions are energy in motion. They need to be moved through the body. And like we already kind of discussed, we can push down the emotions so much so that they cause all sorts of physical illnesses or mental illnesses, right? And so we're starting there with her, if that gives, just to give you a little bit of an example, right? And the other emotion that can come up that I really like to help, especially women, move through is anger. And so to answer a question, oftentimes we do start at the emotional level. Not always is it there. Sometimes it takes a little bit to build the trust and to even feel the emotions, because we're so programmed to just stuff them and ignore them. But oftentimes that's a really good place to start. It's a really good place to start. And so I also like to help women move through anger. So oftentimes, you know, women aren't allowed to express anger, right? Like little girls don't get angry and little boys don't cry. So it's the opposite for men. You know, men tend to be able to express the anger, but not the tears. And it's opposite for women. And so I really like to help women get the anger out, because this was also a sticky point for me. And then so I want to just share a technique that I learned from one of my coaches. It's called the temper tantrum technique. That's what she calls it. And I really support women in being in this safe space where they can go into a temper tantrum. So if you think about a child who might have a temper tantrum, if you honestly just give them a moment to have their temper tantrum, they have it, and you give them the space to have it, as long as they're not doing it to, you know, like seek attention or anything, as long as they're just literally like upset about something, you give them their space. And then they get up, and oftentimes they'll soothe themselves, right? They might do some rocking, they might hug a teddy bear or something. And so this is like the process that I'll walk people through if they need to really get some anger out of their body. And you can set up your space where you have pillows, and maybe you do grab a stuffed animal Those pool noodles, that the foamy pool noodles can be really nice. So you're banging on the pillows, you're using the pool noodles to bang on the pillows, you've got your pillow to scream in, and you're really just allowing the emotion to come up and out, right? And it's not easy, but it's so freeing. And then after you have one of these experiences where you release the big anger, then you come back to self-compassion, right? And the important thing when you're doing one of these releases is that you put words to it. So F you for doing this, and F you, and I can't believe you did this, and really getting words to it can help move it out of the body as well. And then you come back to self-soothing like a child would, right? Put your hands on your heart. Maybe you do a little bit of rocking. You close your eyes, you tell yourself that, good job, I'm so proud of you. And then, tears might come, and that's fine. So you let the tears come. And so, yeah, thank you for letting me share that. I hope that this is helpful for some of your listeners. It certainly was a big pivotal change for me when I started to do these anger releases.
Yeah, I can see also that when you're describing it, it's obviously, so it's releasing the emotions, and there's also the mental release, the vocal release, and the physical, and it's actually bringing all of those things together, whereas I think they often get all disassociated when really they're very much interconnected.
Yes, what a beautiful thing that you were able to connect, because absolutely, it's bringing all of that together that helps get the emotion out. Because remembering all of this is within the body, so we can use sound, we can use movement to help get the emotion out of the body. So yeah, what a beautiful connection you made.
And do you generally start with the verbal? So it sounds like a lot of your coaching is talking, but sometimes do you start getting people to journal, write things down, using different techniques that might work for them if they struggle to speak about what they want help with?
Yeah, absolutely. And just sticking to the emotional level, I'm glad you brought that up, because as we've kind of discussed, this is really important, right? In moving through whatever it is you want to move through, whatever the blockage is, right? It's really important to get to the emotional level of this. And sometimes that can be really challenging. So starting out with journaling can be helpful to even understand how you're feeling, right? Because if so many of us have distracted for so long, we distracted away from understanding those emotions. I know that was me for many, many years. I didn't even know what I was experiencing. I didn't know what the emotions were. So what can really help is starting with, I feel sad because, I feel mad because, I feel angry because, and then beginning to just write, just not even worrying about editing or sentence structure. You're just letting it all out. Pen and paper with this is really important too, because the way that the brain works, the side of the brain that helps you process this is the same side of the brain that allows the connection to happen between the hand and the brain, right? And so it's really important to write some of this out. And so yeah, journaling can be really helpful. And that's a little different than emotional, I would call that more emotional release writing. So there is a difference between emotional release writing and actually journaling. So journaling, I think, is really heady. And a lot of my work is about helping people get out of the head and into the body, because this is where the healing happens, right? And so journaling can be really nice. It can be a really nice processing, a way to process things. And so journaling itself can be really nice. However, emotional release writing is a little different in that we are not trying to process the emotion. All we're trying to do is get it out and get out how we're really feeling. So it's less about thinking about it and more about where it's coming from the body, like in the heart. You're just allowing it to flow. So there is a slight difference. And if we're working on the emotional level, I really like to go with the emotional release writing.
So is that what you mean when you say getting into the body? It's further down, like the brain is not getting involved. It's just literally feelings that you can't necessarily explain.
Yeah, right, exactly. You got it. Yeah, exactly. I think so many of us can can stay within the space, especially us women, right? We can stay all up in here. And the powerful thing is that when we drop into the intuition and in our body, in our wisdom of our body, that's when things really start to change for us. And that's where our power is, especially for us women. And yet a lot of us sit behind computers. We sit a lot of the time, and all of that energy just kind of pulls up within our mind, right? And we're planning stuff, and we've got to think about stuff for our jobs, and we've got kids we have to run around, and all the things, all of that happens up here. And so when we take a moment and just drop into our body, where our feelings are, where our emotions are, where our intuition is, where our wisdom is, things just really start to change for us in our lives, because we tap into that innate wisdom and that innate power within.
Do you think often it is changes within the body that initiates people wanting to figure out the sort of things they figure out with you? Because I often find I'll be working with people actually that there might be a change. Often it can be a physical thing for me, like they might be getting an injury, or they're just feeling like they can't do what they used to be able to do. And that initiates them looking at how they can change that and take control of it. Do you think that can often happen with your work as well? That something changes physically, they're not quite sure what or why, and they may not even realize emotions are behind it, but it's a change that instigates that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, that's a large part of my story. When I started when I started my career as an occupational therapist, and things were great in the beginning, and then I got more and more challenging patients. Things got more and more stressful, and the coping strategies that I had learned in college were no longer working, and I started to have the physical symptoms. My guts, I had so many gut issues. I had insomnia. Then I also had some anxiety and depression that I had my whole life, but I'd been able to manage, but my coping strategies were no longer working. And so, yeah, absolutely. It can definitely start with the physical body. And for a lot of us, that's where it begins, because everything touches everything.
Exactly.
Everything touches everything. So taking a real holistic approach to anything we want to move through is really important.
Yeah. It's responding to a trigger, isn't it? We've all got a trigger, and everyone's is different, but everyone's got that thing that just makes them want to take control.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of my favorite questions to ask my guests, and don't worry, you can take a moment, because often people are like, no. And it's, are there any common myths linked to your industry that you would like to debunk today?
Yes. I would like to debunk the myth that therapy goes to your past and coaching goes to your future. So there's a kind of a myth around how only therapists can go into your past and only coaches talk about your future. Because I actually find in my work that it's really important to actually go back into your past, because our past affects where we're at currently in our life and how we're going to move forward so much. So yes, coaches are about setting goals and helping you with your mindset and looking towards your future. Yes, we do that. And to really get to the root cause of why you aren't moving forward with the life that you want, and you're not living your dream life, we have to go back into the past and heal the root cause. So yes, we can look at the limiting beliefs, and going back into the past and really healing things from the past is what's going to create sustainable, transformational, and lasting change. And so coaches do actually do this. And I find that it's actually really important for the actual transformation. So we can change things in our lives, or we can transform things in our lives. And I'm the coach that really wants you to help you transform your life. And that requires us going to the root, which requires going a little bit back in the past. So love therapy. Therapy is amazing. And they too can work on your future. That's the other thing. So, different modalities, but so very important in helping you evolve and being the person you want to be in your life.
Yeah, it makes complete sense to think of it that way as well. And particularly, you know, if you have a pattern or a cycle that you find yourself going through with whichever aspect of your life you're trying to address, you can't ignore what has come before. You have to think, well, okay, what happened? Can I see perhaps why that happened? How can I look at approaching it and view myself and my choices in a different way in order to get a different outcome, and not think you're always just going to get the same outcome that you've always had before, because you've looked at it, addressed it, and then moved forward with it.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. It's so important to look back at our past to really move forward in our future. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love how quickly you came out with that myth as well. That was no delay at all. Are there any other ones, or are you happy to leave it at that one?
I like that one. I think that one.
Yeah, I liked it. What have you found to be your biggest challenge in helping and educating people in regards to your work?
That's a good question. Biggest challenge. Coming back to the individual, I think it's really individual based. I think accountability. I think accountability can be challenging for me as a coach, just knowing how much accountability this particular individual needs, because everybody needs something a little different, right? And so really knowing how this particular individual is going to show up for themselves, right? And how much support do they need for showing up for themselves, right? And there comes a point where you can only give so much accountability, right?
Yeah. It's your judgment, isn't it? It's your judgment of them, but also their judgment of themselves. Yes.
And well, yes. Yes. And I'm just concerned about the word judgment.
But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah. Conclusion. It's a conclusion, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's more of like a discernment, right? Like just discerning how much does this particular individual really need, and how much as a coach do I provide this accountability for them? Because here's the thing, right? I can't want their transformation more than they do. And sometimes as a coach, and this is just me being real vulnerable as a coach, and where it can be really kind of challenging for me, is that I can't want it more than them. And sometimes that's the case, unfortunately. You know, sometimes that's just the case. And you gotta show up for yourself, right? And working with that's something we can work at. Why is this individual not showing up for themselves, though, too? But in the end, they got to be coachable, and they got to be willing to do the work. That's what it is in the end.
It's that empowerment piece, isn't it? Because and I guess that is what a coach is in that sense. You're aiding them, you're perhaps teaching them the tools, giving them the space. But ultimately, it always comes down to their own choices for their life. And they're not going to work with you forever. So they have to be able to learn to slowly build that self-responsibility in order to benefit from that forever.
Yes.
It's not your responsibility to do it for them.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you talked about providing tools for your clients, because absolutely. My goal is to coach myself out of a job, right? To give you all of the tools that you can then manage and manage your stress and manage all the things in life to where you can feel empowered and live a sovereign life. Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you mentioned the tools. Mm-hmm.
It's so important. Absolutely. It's just vital, isn't it, to give the power to the individual. And do you find, so I'm guessing you work mostly one-to-one with people, but do you think there is a thirst for, again, it's going back to that connection, like a community? Do you have a community where these people can meet together, or?
I do, yeah. Yeah, thank you for asking. I have a Facebook group. It's called Free Your Wild. And in that group, I provide a container and somatic embodiment practices at least once a week. And it's an opportunity to support each other. Yeah. And to have resources, because going back to the tools and resources to empower yourself to begin to go inward and to get clarity and to feel free from the inside out. And so yeah, I love that you asked that. Yeah, one of my favorite ways to do that is through this Facebook community, this free Facebook community, Free Your Wild on Facebook. Yeah.
That sounds great. And in fact, one of my favorite phrases from your website was describing yourself as a wild woman. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So, the wild woman is empowered. The wild woman, it's an archetype, right? So it's a set of characteristics. And I really like to teach women how to tap into their innate wisdom. And that's what the wild woman is. She knows herself. She is full of wisdom. She's full of intuition. She lives a life that was designed by her. And so one of my favorite things to teach women is how to break free of the chains that society places on us, these shoulds, these things that we have to do. So the wild woman doesn't give a shit about, I hope I can cuss on your podcast. Sometimes it just comes out. So she doesn't care about these societal conditions, right? And she's so tapped in to her own innate wisdom and lives from that place daily. So she lives her truth and she lives unapologetically. So I love teaching women how to tap into that power that resides within and giving them the tools to be able to always come back to that intuition and that wisdom.
And was that, it's interesting. Do you think that's why, I'm guessing you went back home eventually after travel? Did you want to spread that message back home with all the wisdom that you'd learned around the world? You wanted to take that back and share it with your fellow American?
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually what I learned leading up to that big traveling adventure, right? Because all of the fear that crept up around quitting my job, because we quit our jobs, sold 95% of the things we owned, sold our house. We literally were living out of backpacks indefinitely. We didn't know when this adventure would end. And so it was really everything leading up to that, right? And how I learned to not be paralyzed by the fear, because that's one of the biggest takeaways out of the whole experience, was not to be paralyzed by fear, because it can paralyze us and stop us in our tracks. And so we started the podcast with this tap on the shoulder, this call, right? We all have this call for something more. Typically in our lives, there's this call for something more, right? There's this restlessness that there's something more to our lives. And I was getting that call, right? I was getting the heat to do something. And I felt over and over again the fear, consistently feeling that fear. What will people think? I spent $80,000 on an education that I'm now just throwing away, right? What would people think? What would my parents think? What would my boss think? What would my friends think, right? So there's all of the what would other people think, and then there's just your internal. So there's the external and then the internal. It's the internal sort of, how am I going to get my supplements if I'm traveling the world? Stuff like that was, I literally had the craziest things coming up in my mind around doing this big thing. What if I'm only going to have 2 t-shirts? Right? I got a whole closet full of clothes, and I'm and getting rid of the stuff, because we decided not to get a storage unit. We really wanted to pare down our things and live life minimalistically. And so there was that whole piece of it, trying to get rid of, furniture that was only 4 years old, so many things that were coming up in my mind. And then on top of that, I really had this desire to spread some sort of message around this. And so then we started a blog, and there's all of that come up with that. Like, how do you start a blog, and will people even read it? And how do I get the message out? And, you know, so there's a lot, but that's the biggest takeaway is I really learned to move beyond the fear. And that's what I like to teach related to the wild woman archetype is, right? It's like, don't let that fear rule your life, and you can move beyond that fear. And when you do, you can live your best life, and you can start living your dreams. Because that was a dream of mine, to travel like that, to travel indefinitely to the world, you know, and so that's the big takeaway.
Allowing yourself to take the leap and just let it happen.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to ask, how did all your friends and family take it?
Yes. Let's see.
Because I think a lot of people often get scared. They get scared for you as well. Like, fear can be transferred, which is always quite an interesting one.
Yeah. You know, my mom reacted in a, okay, like, really? Like, she couldn't believe it. Like, there was this like disbelief when I first told her.
Yeah.
And our friends reacted really supportively, actually. Our friends, they threw us a big going away party, and they wanted to live vicariously through us.
Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, there's some disbelief. There's I think my dad responded in a different way. My dad, I think, is really excited. He tells a lot of people the life that my husband and I have lived. And so yeah, different people reacted differently. But definitely the mind and the story around what they would think was way worse than what they did and how they did it. And that's so common, right? We let the fear loop. We let the fear loop, and we let the stories just loop in our mind.
Yeah.
And that's what stops us, is because everything gets in just this loop in our mind, and we get into these stories and what ifs and what ifs and what ifs. And yeah, so learning to work with the mind and work with the stories and move beyond the fear is important.
Yeah. Our minds don't give us enough credit that we're very resilient at being able to deal with things when we've got to. And we should almost react for that rather than planning ahead for it all, because you'll probably think of 100 scenarios, none of which ever happen, but you could have just dealt with the thing that did.
Exactly. Exactly.
So another one of my favorite questions, and that is, what inspires you?
Nature.
Oh, that's a good one.
Nature inspires me. Yeah. Just knowing that there's something bigger than us allowing the grass to grow, and the tulips and lilies to make their way through the soil every year in the spring, and the amazing change of the seasons. You know, there's something at play that allows all that to happen. And I really feel that when I'm in nature. I feel the sacredness of nature. So nature to me has always been inspiring.
Wonderful answer. I really love that. So as we just start drawing to a close, I would like to finish off by giving you the floor to share one thing that you think everyone would benefit from knowing.
One thing. Oh, just one? Just one? Okay. This is going to be probably general, but I think it's really important that everybody learn to slow down and be still. And when I say slow down and be still, it doesn't mean you have to move to India and sit in a cave for 8 hours a day and meditate and become a monk, right? But it does mean not allowing yourself to be as distracted throughout the day, meaning give yourself 5 or 10 minutes a day to really drop into your body, to slow down the mind, work with the mind in a way that allows the body allows you to feel the body. So meditation is a beautiful way, but it doesn't have to be meditation, right? It can be walking in the woods, but it's really interesting. I have this client right now who talks about going and doing the Pokemon. I'm not with you.
Yeah.
She gets on her phone and she's like, but I go outside every day. I go outside every day and I look for Pokemon stuff, but she's on her phone and she's like, I have to do this or I won't go outside. And it's like, well, you're kind of defeating the point, right? The point of going outside is to feel the sun on your skin, to hear the wind through the leaves as it rustles the leaves, to feel your feet on the earth, right? It's to connect. It's to connect to being outside. Otherwise, just stay inside and play some video game, right? And so that's what I mean when I say drop in. You know, drop in and really be with whatever you are with in that moment, right? Be with yourself, be with nature, find that stillness, drop in. That's going to change the world when more of us just slow the heck down.
Yeah, such a simple thought to leave us with. And I will pop all the details into the show notes, but if my listeners want to reach out, get in touch with you, where is the best place to find you?
Yeah, so my website is leahmcquade.com. It's LeahMcQuade. That's a really easy way to find me. And then Instagram, I love interacting on Instagram. So head over there, follow me, send me a DM. I love it. It's Leah McQuade 1. And also on Facebook, Leah.McQuade 1 on Facebook. Those are really great ways to get a hold of me. And we talked about Free Your Wild Facebook group. I, at least once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, I'll pop on with embodiment exercises. So if you're like, look, Leah, I get the whole stillness thing, but you know, like sitting down and meditating doesn't work, or I need some things, then pop on, because they're really great practices to help you find that stillness and to slow down and to tap into your body. And I give so many, and they're all varieties, and you can go on and check out ones from, weeks ago. So I really love interacting with that community over there too. So Free Your Wild, head over there. And so those are the ways to get a hold of me. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. As I say, I'll pop all of that onto the show notes so people can click straight through. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Live Fit Now podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. I would love to hear from you, so don't forget you can get in touch through social media, clicking through the links in the show notes, or email me directly, hello@livefitnow.co.uk. Until the next time.